Hey everybody, it's Safi and Marco Dish Out on Movies, the only movie review show on YouTube to review movies in terms of food. It's just Marco here once again, and this is a continuation of my American Horror Story Season 3 review. It's really funny because I posted about this video on my Instagram and I lost like 4 followers. And I thought it's hilarious because, like, it's not like I hated this season. I just said that, I'm just being exaggerating for comedic effect. But at the same time, like, it did really infuriate me the fact that it started out so strong and ended so weakly. And so, I don't know, it's pretty weird how people are about, like, other people's opinions. Like, automatically, if I don't say whatever people want me to say, they immediately get upset and they just leave because they don't want to hear any other opinions except for their own that they already have, echoed, like an echo chamber. And unfortunately, I'm not going to be doing that here. There's a ton of problems that I haven't even discussed yet. And, we've already gone through Queenie. We've already gone through Delphine. And now here's the thing, too. I did not know that Delphine was a real person. I assumed that all these characters were fake and that they were only, like, inspired off of real people. I did not realize that I was giving compliments to a real-life serial killer, serial torturer. So, whoopsie-doo, whoopsie. Like, I don't really care, honestly, because I'm just looking at it as a character. I'm not looking at it as a real person. So, they should have given her a different name. They should have given her, like, Madam Laura Lee or something. They shouldn't have called her the real person because obviously I read that the real person never got caught and that she like fled to Europe or something. And, obviously I would have wanted to see the real person get caught and put to justice, even in the way on the show. So, there's no question about that. It's just I'm talking about this character that they presented and the way that her character progressed, what I hoped for versus what happened. So, Zoe, now let's just go down the line because I'm going to get this all done. And then I bet at the end of this I'm going to be like, okay, watch out for part 4. Zoe, as I already talked about with the zombies, I'm trying to think about, like, the rest of the season. She's pretty much just doing odd things. Oh, Zoe's the one who was too lazy to just look around the house. And that was another thing, was a lot of the problems in the season came from Madison being killed. Which is funny because when she got killed, I cheered. I gotta admit, I was like visibly happy. I was smiling. I was very excited. And then when I realized she was going to be brought back, I was like, ugh, gross. And the thing that was frustrating about these resurrections, because let's see, how many times did they bring someone back? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Like, I think they brought characters back to life like 8 to 9 times. And so the problem that I had, though, was that you have one character, Evan Peters. I can't even remember his character's name because the whole season you're hoping and you're wishing that he'll attain full memory so that he can be like a character and not just like a sex object that sits around in the bedroom waiting for his 2 girlfriends to have sex with him. But instead, he just remains like a zombie the whole season, except for like a little bit to where he can tell Zoe that he loves her. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I thought like it was creepy. I thought it was creepy that he did not have his full brain capacity. Honestly, if it were me and if it were someone that, I had brought back to life, I would not be very comfortable with engaging into anything with that person because they're, he's basically at like 10% capacity. And that's not really, I don't think that sends a good message. It was another thing about like, it felt like just teenage girl fantasy. Like girls who shop at Hot Topic, shop at the mall, just like this fantasy that like, you can get this boyfriend and he can just be your sex object who just sits around like an idiot and he's got girly earphones on and he's trying to learn things like an idiot and like a child. Like, it's really creepy, honestly. But you're waiting and waiting. Like, that would have been a really cheer-worthy moment. I was waiting for the moment where he would finally reach full consciousness and he would be himself again. And it could have been like so cool and so heroic and such an awesome turn. Because I'm telling you something, there's all these other characters in the show who are brought back to life and they don't have any issue. They don't have this 10 episode thing where they're zombies and they're killing people because they don't understand. They don't have this like Frankenstein story. So I don't understand why it's so inconsistent and why all these other characters who are brought back to life, they have full memory. They have or Madison, she takes like 2 seconds to get back to full memory. And then Myrtle, she doesn't even need any time. And, you had other characters too. Zoe in the finale. It was just very inconsistent. And that's the thing that I had to realize by the end of this season was that, I was excited about, a viewer commented and she said that she liked how people had these crazy powers that are really over the top. And I was really excited about that. But the thing is that the writers, they only used those powers and they only made things happen when it was convenient for the plot. And so that's what was frustrating to me, especially when it came to the resurrection element. And then you see with the Supreme, to become a Supreme, that's one of the main tests you have to do. And it's weird because it's like almost everyone in the school can do that power. And so it's like, who even cares about, like, that evil Kathy Bates character? Who even cares about, like, let's say, Madame Laveau sacrificing babies because they can just bring them back to life, right? It's really weird. So I guess we should start talking about Madame Laveau. So I really liked her character. She seemed like she was going to be really badass, and she was. She had a lot of power. She was probably, at least in my opinion, like the second most powerful person on the whole show. And somebody pointed this out on IMDb, so I don't want to, take credit. Somebody pointed out that, we were wondering, where did she get all this power? Like, these witches, it seems like they can only master one power. They only have one special gift. With Madame Laveau, she has like every single gift in the book. Like, she can basically do anything. And it's so like cool how she has the salon, and I said saloon in the other video, I'm sorry. And how she's just living this quote unquote normal life, and underneath that it's like, no, she's like a powerful voodoo queen. And I thought that was really cool. And you're wondering, where did those powers come from? And this person on IMDb, what a good point they said was that they just came from another obscure human being, not human being, a demonic being named Papa Legba. And this Papa Legba, he was a pretty cool character. Like, he kind of reminded me of the Leprechaun a little bit, and he did a really good job. I really loved the costume. But it was sort of weird because it's like, where did he come from? How does he have all that power? Like, it's another thing where, oh, if there isn't anything on the other side, then how do all these beings exist? Like, how does this demonic being exist? This being who's existed since the beginning of time. It just doesn't make any sense unless they made up some mythology where people created it, like they created Candyman, and they brought Candyman back to life, And so, another thing, though, is that, as I said, Madame Laveau's entire salon of people gets massacred in like 2 seconds by a low-level side character, the husband, which we'll talk about. They had this really cringeworthy, like, crappily shot sex scene with him and this woman, and then you think, oh no, he's a scumbag like the guy from season 1, and then it turns out he's a secret agent and he kills her, and then it turns out he's a witch hunter. Like, you see what I mean, how the show keeps on like twisting things around to where it's almost like they're not twisting it for a good plot, they're just twisting it so that they can have plot conveniences. Like, that's a big example, because other than that, they wouldn't have really had a lot of story in the second half of the show. Like, they would have had trouble, so they had to come up with this like extra plot element of these witch hunters. And it's unfortunate because, to me, I think the witch hunters should have been the villains of the first season. Of this season. And they should have been around since the beginning of the season. They did say that they did some things earlier on, like they did this acid attack on Crybaby, which is what made her blind for the first time, before she gets unblinded and then reblinded again. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention that when Crybaby becomes supreme, she gets her eyesight back. So they went flip-flop, flip-flop, flip-flop with her and her eyesight. And then I think they also said that they tried to kill Misty Day in her house, in her shack. So they did kind of say that they were around the whole time, but I really wish that they were around, like, in terms of in the episodes. Because the way that they were just shoehorned in and then they're immediately killed off 2 seconds later, it didn't make much sense. They did something where they ruined their company, like the witch hunters, they have a company together, and they financially drain their company, and then they set up a meeting, and that's where another character comes in who I haven't talked about much yet, so I guess I should. Well, I should talk about Fiona. Fiona is one of the highlights of this season. As usual, Jessica Lange, anything she'll do is a highlight. And, her character in every single episode is just a treat to watch. Although, as the season goes on, it's like they kind of run out of stuff for her to do. And it feels like she doesn't really have much to do besides sit around and feel sorry for herself, because they're trying to make this point about how she doesn't have power anymore because she's dying from cancer. And so it's kind of like this queer thing where she peaked in like the middle of the season, and after that she just kind of dipped and dipped and dipped, and finally she did this random faking of her death, and then she ended up dying in the end still. It was really weird. So her character, she starts off in uh, it seemed like she was going to be the villain. And I was excited because I genuinely thought that it would be interesting to see the different teachings affecting these young girls. Like, that's what I thought that the show was going to be about. I thought that, like, you were going to have Fiona's style of teaching, and it was going to conflict with Cordelia, the crybaby, her style of teaching. And that was going to conflict with Misty Day's style of teaching. And her style of teaching was going to conflict with Madame Laveau, Mary, is it Madame Laveau or Marie Laveau? Marie Laveau's type of teaching. You know, I thought it was going to be about like these, because it was weird. They had this running theme of bad parenting and bad guiding people growing up. And you'd think that if they want to do that, the best way to do it is to show these adults guiding the kids. And they didn't really do that at all. I mean, they mostly focused on Fiona wanting to stay supreme and stay young. And then it was really all about who's going to be supreme. And honestly, I didn't even fucking care. Like, I didn't even care until they broke their own rules. So, I was more concerned about, like, why aren't these girls getting taught anything? Like, these are the worst caregivers. They don't protect the girls. They don't know where they are half the time. They don't know what they're doing. It's really weird. It's almost like they're just like all a bunch of roommates or something. It's really not like they had this thing where the Cheerios witch, she had to be taken to this finishing school so that she could be kept safe because there's not many witches around. But they can't even keep her safe though. Like, they literally never keep the girls safe. Like, you know, it's really weak. It's weak, and it's kind of like they just make things up as they go along. They just add stories and take them away as they go along. And they don't really care about it making sense in the big picture. And so the fact that people got upset that I, dared to criticize this show just shows that, there were definitely problems and they didn't ever get criticized. And that's why the show declined in quality, is because nobody spoke up when this season came out. So Fiona, her character, she has this whole backstory that I thought was interesting, where there's also this really annoying, awful, obnoxious character named Myrtle Snow, and she's like this goody-goody two-shoes who, she's kind of like a flamboyant, like, witch, but she's not a witch, but she's just like this girl with like really red hair, and it's like, okay, she's basically like an aesthetic character so that teenage girls can cosplay as Myrtle Snow. She's really not much of a character. So she knows that Fiona killed her mom, and there's this really cool plot where she wants the butler Spaulding to tell. And it was really cool because there was this whole mystery over who cut out Spaulding's tongue, and I thought that was a really cool story. And then, oh god, it turns out Spaulding cut it out himself. Unfortunately, though, it was way too familiar. And when they showed him cutting out his tongue, and he told her that he loved her, it was very reminiscent of season 1, where that same actor was also madly in love with Jessica Lange, and she friend-zoned him. And so I thought it was weird how they copied that storyline. And by the way, him loving Fiona literally never comes into play the rest of the season. It's basically all for the backstory and all for him to sort of stay quiet about what's going on in the present for a couple of episodes. And so then they show in the present, he also refuses to tell on her, and instead he frames Myrtle Snow. And so then they burn Myrtle Snow at the stake. And I honestly didn't even care because I thought, you know what? She's not really doing much to help the Coven. She's she's I mean, she's so stupid she can't even search the whole house for a dead body. I mean, that's the first thing people do. Like the police, they'll get a warrant to search a house, and then they'll search the house for the dead bodies. You, you know what that's like? It's like in that Dahmer show where they just stood in the doorway and they didn't even bother to go into his apartment or go into the bedroom where there was clearly a dead body on the floor. It's the same type of stupidity where it's so stupid that you have to wonder if it was purposeful or not. And with Myrtle Snow, she gets killed and then they bring her back to life. Of course, Misty Day does. And then from then on, she gives some of the worst advice of the whole show. Like, she gives this terrible advice. She says that Misty Day should be the supreme because she's brought things back to life. I don't know what that's about. And then, she says all this stupid shit, and she does all these stupid things, and people only like her because of her aesthetic and her flamboyant quotes. Like, she has these quotes that are just kind of like a try-hard, like show-off, pretentious college student in a philosophy class wrote them. That's what it's like. And her character, she also survives the season, or does she? I can't even remember at this point. I think she does, yeah, because she was judging the competition. And she conspired with Crybaby to fix the competition so that Crybaby could win. So, Fiona has this whole plot with her. I actually kind of liked that plot. I thought it was the best thing of the season. And then they had this plot where they wanted to kill Fiona. And they had this really cool thing where she is so drugged up and so, like, weak. But then she decides, with the help of Spaulding's ghost, to fight on and to tell these people to F off and to do a fake out. And I thought that was another really incredible and cool, epic sequence. And it just made me wonder what is going to happen. Because the problem was that it's like, okay, who's the villain here? Like, who am I supposed to root for? Who am I supposed to root against? I mean, it's easy with the flashbacks where you see Kathy Bates committing these terrible crimes. It's easy to root against her. But in the present, with all these characters, it's like, okay, who's good and who's evil? Because they constantly flip-flop. They constantly do things that make you go, ooh, ah, oh. So then in the second half of the season, Fiona, she falls in love with the spirit of the Axeman, who was released by the Cheerios Witch, which I gotta say is one of the most stupidest plots in American horror story history. Because I know it might sound like bias, or it might sound like I'm jealous of the characters, which I'm not. It's the fact that it literally came out of nowhere. It was like they didn't know what to do with Fiona's character, and so they just had her get into this love story with the Axeman. And the Axeman was a terrible character. He was like this creepy, sleazy, weird-looking guy. And it was weird because he didn't really have any motives. He didn't really have anything to his character. And then I look up and I find out that his character is real too. And since they don't know anything about who he was in real life, they don't really know anything about who he was on the show. And so it's another instance of where real life was seeping into the show too much, because they should have written a better character. His character really came out of nowhere. I thought it was kind of cool at first, though, because it is something where they say do not use Ouija boards because, all you do is just bring out something that you don't want to bring out. And in this case, they brought out this really creepy serial killer. They showed him walking down the street, and he looked like the Exorcist guy. He looked very creepy. And unfortunately, he doesn't really do jack shit besides have sex with Fiona and then play jazz music. And now here's where he comes into that meeting. So the witches and the witch hunters have this meeting set up, and then they freeze time, and the Axeman kills all the witch hunters in like a couple of seconds. And what's really cringeworthy about it is that it's almost like the story is that Fiona is just using him, and that the story for her character is she uses people, and so eventually she would use someone who would use her back, and he would be like a negative type of person. But what I really didn't like about it was that it didn't feel right for her character. Her character was so strong in the first half, it didn't make any sense for her to become so weak in the second half to where she would have to rely on this secondary random character. Like I would have wanted to see those two witches, her and Marie Laveau. I would have wanted to see them kill all those witch hunters by themselves. I didn't want to see the Axeman swing around and start axing people. I thought that was kind of weak. I thought it was just kind of an easy way out. And they even said it. In the last video, I said, Angela Bassett said, it was so much easier to defeat these guys than I would have thought. It's like, yeah, I wonder why. So then what happens is that Fiona finally gets killed by the Axeman, because the Axeman realizes that she's playing him, but then it turns out, oh no, actually she used him to pretend to kill her, so that then they would pretend kill him, but then it would actually kill him, and then she actually comes back and kills herself as well. Like, it's really, really confusing, messy, jumbled, and it doesn't make any sense. So finally Fiona's dead, and we see that she's in hell, and her personal hell is being in a cabin in the middle of nowhere with the Axeman. I thought it was a very disturbing and kind of creepy ending. So I will say, at least they did a good job with the creepy factor, because it was really kind of uncomfortable to see that would be the ending for this character. But at the same time, like, it was really like unsatisfying for her story. Her story in the first half was really good, and then in the second half it's just so I'm trying to think of who's next. And I should mention that both Marie Laveau and Delphine get killed, and they are stuck in a personal hell together. And I actually did like that idea, because it was interesting how the message of that was that both of them did not overcome their hatred and their vengeful attitudes. Like, you had on one hand, Delphine never learned to change and never learned to stop being a sadistic serial killer. And then on the other hand, Marie never stopped learning to be vengeful and just kill, kill, kill. And Papa Legba even says, oh, you didn't think you were going to be punished for your crimes? And so it's like it was basically almost saying that they were both equally bad. And it was really sad because she said, I thought I was a good person. I thought I did all these good things. And I thought that was really interesting that they were trapped in hell together. And it actually made me want to see, them get out of it. And it made me want to see, because they really got rid of the best characters before the final episode, which was a big issue for me. They took them out of the picture, and then in the finale, everything just teetered out. So, let's see, is there anything else throughout the season that I should talk about? Well, I guess Spaulding. Spaulding is a weird character. He has this doll fetish, and he likes to cross-dress at like a baby or something. It's really weird. And there's this whole plot where he's like a necrophiliac too, and that doesn't really go anywhere at all. Because you're thinking, what negative effects in this American Horror Story universe would come from being a necrophiliac? It kind of felt like maybe Spaulding was going to have some sort of a story where he's like a grave robber or something, but they didn't ever do anything with that. And then they had this story where he gets killed by the Cheerios girl, and that's another thing that she does which pissed me off, because it's like, okay, that was really kind of pointless almost. It was really and the reason why we find out is for plot convenience, because then when he's dead, he can speak as a ghost. But then it's funny because she also gave him a tongue, and she gave him his own tongue, and she sewed it back up, and she did some magic. And it's, as I said, they can literally just undo any sort of bodily harm. So basically, bodily harm isn't really anything to worry about in this universe. So it's weird. It's like she did that, and then she still killed him, and then he talked as a ghost. So then as a ghost, she did this whole fake out thing with Kathy Bates. I thought that was kind of funny, actually. I kind of liked that a little bit, but it was really random. But then we find out it's so that he can steal Angela Bassett's baby, the innocent baby that she got, so that she could sacrifice it to Papa Legba. But then it's weird because we never see what happens to the baby. Spaulding just steals the baby, and we never even see what happens. It's like they literally forgot about this storyline, and I was wondering, why did this have to happen? Because the thing that I thought was, this was another thing that it felt they copied this straight out of season 1, where if you remember, they distracted the main characters, the gay couple distracted them so that they could steal their baby and have the baby for themselves. They did the exact same thing. And then, of course, Jessica Lange ends up stealing the baby. And it felt like, oh, there's another plot line that they copied. They copied from their own show. So, I think that's about it. So that was a big plot hole. There's a lot more I could talk about, too. I mean, it's just that a lot of it feels like, okay, I'm talking about the same things over and over, but I'm not. It just feels that way because the season was so repetitive. I will say, too, I thought that the show was shot really well. That they had a really cool style that they shot with this season, where they had these kind of wide angles that made people look really weird and really abstract. And they had a lot of these weird angles where they would be diagonal, or they would be upside down and then they'd turn right side up. And I'm going to take a drink. But the weirdest part was the finale. The finale was just a complete letdown. You know, I guess I should just embrace every season that the finale is going to be straight up trash. I probably will watch the first episode of season 4 tonight because I want to get through this series so that I can stop being disappointed every season. You know, like it feels like every season I get disappointed and I get let down, even though there's a lot of stuff that I like. And I was really sad about Marie Laveau because I really wanted more with her character. I felt like she wasn't given as much story as the other people. And I felt like in the second half, instead of her running off to be with the main Coven, I felt like I wanted to see more of her developing by herself. Because it didn't feel natural that she just ran over there like a sick puppy to join up with that terrible coven of trash witches. I mean, we haven't even talked about Crybaby yet. Like, Crybaby, she has this whole story where she wants to have a baby, and she's trying all these different ways, trying all these different, like, okay, can she do witchcraft? Can she do voodoo? She can't do that. You know, like, she's trying all these different things. And it's like, at the same time, she has no idea that all these bad things are going on right under her nose. And you're kind of hoping that throughout the season that she's going to become stronger. And there was something really cool where the acid went in her eyes, and then she did kind of become cool for a while, but then she was given her eyesight back. And then they had this whole back and forth where she kept on flip-flopping with that. Meanwhile, she didn't really protect the girls at all. She didn't really... I mean, she was a terrible leader, and I guess she wasn't supreme. But still, she was in charge of the school. And it didn't really feel like it at all. It felt like there was no one who was in charge of the school, actually. Like, if they did a sequel to Coven, if they did a Coven Part 2, I would want it to actually make them... I would want it to actually make the school function as a school, instead of just functioning as almost like a hangout house, you know, like where they don't really learn anything. They're just hanging out. They're not really doing much of anything besides getting into trouble. Another thing was that I was sad that the Minotaur got taken out so fast. And that was one thing where, you know, Fiona, she killed the Minotaur in like 2 seconds. Like, it was another thing where you could say super easy, barely an inconvenience. And I actually wanted to see the Minotaur for more of the season. So that was disappointing. So, I don't know, like, maybe they should have made Marie Laveau the villain, because it would have been a twist on things. You know, maybe they should have just stuck with someone being the villain at least. Like, even if it was Delphine. That was the thing, was that I was waiting the whole season. I was like, they're not really going to have her be this, like, redeemed character. I thought there's got to be some moment where she becomes in charge of everything and she overpowers everyone and starts doing evil shit. But it never really happens. They really went with the she needs to be redeemed storyline, and then they didn't even fully commit to it. So that was a waste. In the finale, it's basically all about the test of the Seven Wonders. And oh yeah, another way that I can tell that this is gone mainstream is the celebrity cameo. And I know they're all celebrities, but they had Stevie Nicks actually on the show for 2 episodes. And it just felt like the most cringeworthy, shoved in there, like just, ugh, this is kind of awkward type of thing in the whole show. Like, it really didn't feel like it was needed. And then they had this really bad music video in the finale with Stevie Nicks, another bad part of the show. I just skipped through the whole music video because I thought, I'm not sitting through this cringe. So then they show the test, and let's see. The first shitty thing that happens is that Misty Day, they all have to go to their own personal hells so that they can see what it's like, and then they have to escape it. And you'd think that this could lead to some very interesting interactions. You know, you'd think that you could have some really cool, like, personalized adventures with these characters. And instead, it's just Misty Day trapped in a science classroom where she has to cut open a live frog over and over and over again. And she can't escape, and she fails, and then she explodes into dust. And they literally just kind of acted like nothing happened. It was the most disappointing thing because the whole season, she was this badass, powerful character. She was a very heroic character, and I really liked her character a lot. She was really cool, and then to just kill her off like that was just so shitty. So then they do transmutation, where they're teleporting away, they're teleporting here and there, and this is where things get really goofy and really dumb. So Zoe teleports, and she's having too much fun. You know, she had too much fun. Remember that line? I'll use that line anytime I can. And she was though, like she was like making it into a game, and then she somehow teleported herself into the gate spikes, which didn't make any sense. It's like, wait, how did she do that? Like she's transmutating or whatever it is. How did she teleport to where she's impaled on the spikes? It's like, okay, whatever. It's just something shitty that happened, and so she got taken out. Evan Peters gets upset, even though he barely has a character. And basically, they want Madison Montgomery to bring Cheerios Witch back to life. And Madison Montgomery brings up the good point that, wait a second, isn't that kind of like cheating? You just want to bring her back so that I have less of a chance at being the Supreme, because they see Fiona in her. And that was another thing that they didn't really play with a lot in the season, except for when it was convenient to the plot in these 2 episodes. They did it in episode 3, and they did it in episode 13. Other than that, they didn't really act like they had a lot of similarities at all. I mean, Fiona, for her to have been a movie star would just be a big joke. I mean, I'm sorry, but Fiona's character probably thinks movie stars are a bunch of fucking losers. Okay? So they really weren't very similar at all. But Madison refuses to bring Zoe back to life. And I thought, oh God, now they ruined that. They got rid of that character. Oh no. Crybaby enters the game, and Crybaby brings back Cheerios Girl to life. And she wins the competition. But then Madison is in her room, and Evan Peters walks in, and he chokes her And it's like, okay, are they trying to make us feel sorry for this bitch again? I mean, just every moment they could with this bitch, it was like, okay, feel sorry for her, feel sorry for her, feel sorry for her. And I couldn't care less about Madison Montgomery. But then what happens is she dies. But the funny thing is that she could have literally teleported away. Like, they were just doing the whole transmutation thing. Well, she could have literally done that while he was choking her. She didn't have to just sit there and let him choke her. And she could have even used telekinesis. I mean, it's just really... the characters on this show are fucking stupid. So she's gone. And I cheered. I was like, yay! So that whole thing where she was brought back was just a waste of screen time. It was just all for teenage girls to see her character again, basically, rather than any story reason. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else worth mentioning that happens. Well, then, of course, we see that the crybaby's mom faked her death, and they have one last talk. And then Crybaby opens up the door, and she says, I'm the new Supreme, and she welcomes everyone in, and she has her eyesight back. I thought that was stupid, because you'd think that after all this time of wanting to have a baby, you'd think that she'd be more concerned about that than her eyesight or her psychic visions. I mean, she just did a complete 180 where she was all about having a baby. And then it became about she's all about having psychic visions. So, I think that's about it. I'm really sick of talking about this shitty season because to me, I think this season is the worst in the fact that they let us down the most. Like, I wasn't expecting season 11 to have a good ending. I wasn't expecting season 10 to turn out very good. Even seasons 1 and 2. But for season 3, I thought, everyone loves this season. It's got to at least have a good ending. It's got to have a good second half. But no. I would say this is definitely the most disappointing season out of all the seasons that I've seen so far, because it could have been the best. So I might do another video about this season in the future, because there's definitely still things that I could talk about, just in talking about, like, how you guys remember the clairvoyant girl. She was pointless. She just became a worthless human sacrifice character, so she wasn't really worth anything in the show. Just everything in the show just teetered down and became useless and pointless. And that's what's really disappointing about these American Horror Story seasons, is that everything starts off with this strong potential, and then by the end of it, it all teeters down into nothingness. So anyways, please like this video and comment. Tell me what you thought of American Horror Story Season 3. And then please subscribe to this channel if you'd like to see more American Horror Story videos. Goodbye, everybody. See you soon.